How much do you need to make per hour to be profitable and stay in business? That's the question we're answering today. So, if you're starting or growing a coaching or consulting business and you have no idea where to start, or you feel cringy about your rates, this one's for you. Look, I've got a no fail formula and some mindset tools that are going to help you figure out a rate that sets you up for long term success. Pricing brings up a lot, imposter syndrome, overthinking, fear of being too expensive. And there are negative terms associated with it, like greedy. And we worry about what other people are going to think. So, setting your rates as a coach or consultant is actually not something a lot of programs teach. Actually, they don't even have teach you how to do this in most MBA programs. So, what do? We look around to see what other people are charging. We pick something that feels fair. We ask ChatGPT. Now, look, all of those ways will get you to a price, but none of them include a way for you to check and make sure the amount that you're charging is going to help you create a profitable and thriving business that gets you to your enough number. So today we're going to change that. I'm Laura Zavelson, and this is the Gen Expert Show, where we talk about how you can intentionally build a coaching or consulting business where you can kick ass now, retire when you're ready, and so you never, ever have to be out there looking for a job again, unless you really want to. Okay, so pricing feels awkward for all of us, for pretty much every single one of my clients, and for me too. Look, I'm not going to go too much into the psychology of that today. We can leave that for another episode, and there are actually experts that help you with that for their whole jobs. Okay. The thing about pricing is that it drives the success of your business. The revenue equation is simple math. How much you charge times how many of your thing that you sell equals revenue. And revenue minus business expenses equals how much you have left over to pay yourself. And remember that when you're paying yourself, you actually have to account for taxes, maybe healthcare, retirement. So that amount you have left over, we have to be sure that that's big enough for you to pay for all that stuff and have enough left over to make being a business owner feel worth it to you. So that number that will make you feel successful, that's your enough number. All right. So here's the math. Revenue minus business expenses equals enough number. Enough number is what we want to solve for. So generally coaching and consulting are not expense heavy businesses. So the number we have to play with in this equation is revenue. The thing is that when most people set their prices, they don't take that enough number into account. So it creates this revenue gap. It's a gap between what you want or need to earn and what you're actually charging. So what we've got to do is tie those things together, or your business isn't going to be able to sustain you. All right. So in coaching and consulting, there are basically 4 ways you can price your work. First is hourly. And this is how most coaches start because you're doing one-on-one sessions. And that's fine. But probably down the line, you're going to need to evolve away from that. But this is the perfect video for you to watch to set that rate. And I'm going to walk you through the formula of exactly how to do it in just a few minutes. Okay. Now, the second way to charge is project based. So consultants and independent experts, a lot of you start here. But the reality is the way most of us come up with project pricing is that we guesstimate the number of hours it's going to take and then multiply by an hourly rate. So you guys need to stick around and come up with a good hourly rate formula too. The third way you can charge is called a retainer. And this is mostly used by consultants, but I've seen some coaches use it too. Basically, it's a way where clients can reserve time with you to have ongoing access to your expertise. So it's kind of like being on call for strategy or advice or feedback. They're not really paying for hours. They're more paying to know you're there when they need you. So the way you would generally quote this is by thinking about like what percentage of time you think that client might take, or how much of of your time that client might want to reserve. So 5%, 10%, 25%. When you start talking about more than 20%, now we're really kind of talking about more of a fractional role often in their company. So again, if you're a consultant, like a fractional CFO or CMO or chief revenue officer, right? Anyway, in order to be able to quote that amount, you're going to have a good feel for your enough number. And the fourth way we can charge is program based. And that's where we take coaching and consulting services and we package them up and we charge for them like a product. And I'm going to be covering that in another episode in just a few weeks. So go ahead and make sure you subscribe if you want to make sure that you see that one, okay? So, how do you set an hourly rate that makes sense? Well, let's talk about how most models get it wrong. The first one that I find that I see on the internet is that they say, "Well, take what you were making at your full time job and figure out what the hourly would have been on that, and then multiply that times three, right, to account for the time that you have to spend marketing and taxes and healthcare and whatever." But the thing is, that just reinforces the wage gap for women. So as consultants, like you're automatically charging less than you're worth out of the gate, right? Because we know that there's a wage gap between men and women who are doing the same work. So I don't like that way. And it's also completely not helpful if you've taken time out of the workforce. Also, not helpful if you're pivoting to another career. So let's look at some other choices. Some other ones base pricing off of looking at like a 40-hour work week, but that's really dangerous because most women, because of caregiving responsibilities and the second shift, um, they don't have 40 hours. The other thing is that with most of those models, they don't do a good enough job talking about working hours versus billable hours. And so that's part of what my model is going to help us take into account. Okay. So here's how we're going to do this. I call it inside out pricing because we're going to close that revenue gap by starting with your enough number instead of starting with how much you charge. So let's just walk through this spreadsheet. You can do this yourself, or you can just download this exact spreadsheet. I stuck the link in the description. Okay. So we start with your enough number. Now, your enough number, again, is the amount of money that makes you feel like your talent is fully valued and that your business is working for you financially, emotionally, energetically. Okay. And don't forget, this number has to be big enough for you to pay your taxes. And if you need to, healthcare, and potentially put something away for your retirement. All right. All right, so we start with the enough number here, and I'm just going to use $150,000. Okay, yours can be $750,000. Yours can be $70,000. Okay, I'm just going to use $150,000 here. Okay, then we work backwards. So, how much do you want to work? How much time off do you need to feel like a human? And then, how many hours a week do you want or even have to work? Right? And this is where a lot of those models go wrong because we need to think about that all of your hours aren't billable. Okay, so this is really important. I literally had a client say to me last week, if I work 20 hours a week and I charge $150 an hour, that's $3,000 a week and $150,000 a year. Well, the problem with that math is it doesn't account for any time that you spend marketing or billing or networking or doing discovery calls, right? If you truly have 20 hours a week to work, then we need to assume that at least half of that time is probably spent marketing and selling your services. And that is just the reality of working for yourself. So right here, this is where we make an estimate about the billable hours. And so I'm just going to put 50% right in here. But actually, in the beginning of your business, you actually may spend more time marketing and selling than you do coaching or consulting. Okay. So that's going to spit out an hourly rate for you right here. Okay, so I am not saying, don't hear me saying that you can automatically just charge this rate. So, one of the problems with charging by the hour is that it's really easy for clients to make snap comparisons and to sort of say, well, what am I getting for that much an hour, right? What I'm saying, what this number shows you is what it's going to take per hour that you spend with a client in order to get you to that enough number. So let's be realistic about whether or not an hourly model is actually going to get you there. And if not, then we can start thinking about some of those other ways I talked about earlier to charge, right? By the project or by the retainer or by a program that might actually help you close that gap and get you where you need to be. Look, pricing is not just a number, it's a driver of business design. Because why commit to a business if there's no way it can ever get you to that enough number? You're just going to make yourself frustrated and miserable. Okay, so the last thing I want to do before we finish up for the day is I want to have an honest conversation about the time and money trade off. So, in the beginning, you might actually need to work more hours than you want to. So, you can design a business that lets you get to that enough number working only a very few hours a week. But that kind of business is going to take you some time to build. So, if you want to get to a place where you're working 4-hour days a couple days a week or 6-hour days a couple days a week, right? You probably can't start there. You're going to have to put in some time and energy in creating the container for that business that's actually going to give you what you want. But the good news is that if you know where you want to go, you can design a business where you work less, right? Either by paying other people to do what you do or by selling an evergreen product or service. But you're going to need time to develop it and test it and get it up and running. And so that's why knowing where you want to go can actually save you a lot of time, money, and frustration. Actually, business design is one of the very first things we work on in my program because we get clear on what success looks like for you, right? In terms of time and money and impact that you want to have, right? And then what is the trade off that you're willing to make in the short term to build a business that actually gives you everything you want in the long term? And then we create a plan that reflects that, one that you can actually follow. So even when your business doesn't look perfect, you know you're making progress towards your goal. All right, so let's wrap this up. If you are just starting, I think one on one hourly work is super helpful because it helps you deeply understand your clients. And to do that, you're probably going to need an hourly rate so you can use this method to calculate it. And that should take some of the emotion out of it for you, right? Because you know that you're closing the revenue gap. All right. Now, as you progress in your business, there are other business models that are going to make more sense: project pricing, retainers, and programs. However, in order to determine how much you want to quote for projects and retainers, it can be really helpful to have an hourly hurdle rate based on some realistic assumptions about your billable hours. So, next steps for everyone. Download the calculator from the description, run your numbers, and start thinking about the products and services that you need to offer and the number of people that are going to need to buy them to get you to that enough number where you feel really good about your business. Okay. Now, if you've got a friend who's struggling with her pricing, I would love it if you'd share this episode. And if pricing is something that continues to be a challenge for you in your business, definitely hit subscribe because I've got a few more episodes in the work where I'm going to share more tools and mindset shifts that you can use to make sure that you're getting paid what you're worth. All right, that's it for me today. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, and I'm going there right now.